When people use the statement, beauty will save the world, what they typically mean is like, making beautiful things will save the world. But then if they're called to justify it, what they do is they say, yes, well, beauty is an attribute of God, perhaps even a synonym of God. So really when I say beauty will save the world, what I mean is God will save the world. And so I think there's an attendant risk with praising beauty too much. Beauty is a creature. Beauty is not God, although God is beautiful.
Welcome everyone to Fulfillment Project. Today, I'm joined by someone whose work lives at the crossroads of art, theology, and education, Stephen Barany. Stephen's an illustrator, he's an educator, and a theologian whose sacred art and imagery and imaginative storytelling invite us to see the world with wonder and depth. From his award-winning icons to whimsical 3D coloring pages, Stephen's work is both playful and profound. And I can't wait to get into some of it. It's crazy. I've been reading the books with my sons, and it's amazing. He teaches at Holy Cross College. He holds an MFA in illustration and a Master of Divinity. And he's the creative force behind the upcoming children's book, Alphabet Parade. And is it still upcoming, Stephen? I know I got an early copy, or is that puppy out there ready to go?
You know, I'd say it's out there. You can get it for pre-order, but you know what? Let's just say it's out there.
It's out there. So in this episode, we're going to talk about how faith shapes your creativity, Stephen, the power of visual storytelling, and what it means to build a counter environment to the digital world. One page, one prayer, one pencil stroke at a time. So everyone, grab your coffee, grab your drink, settle in. Let's dive into the sacred imagination of Stephen Barany. Stephen, welcome to Fulfillment Project. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing great. Thanks for that awesome introduction. You got me hyped to be here, so this is good.
I love it. Where are you calling in from?
So I am here in South Bend, Indiana. Actually, technically Notre Dame, Indiana. We share the same zip code as the famous university across the street. I'm here in my office at Holy Cross College.
How'd you end up at Holy Cross?
Oh, man, the short answer is Divine Providence. I grew up here in South Bend. I actually spent time as a seminarian with the congregation of Holy Cross, and I was studying to be a priest for a long time and decided to step away for some reasons. But one of them was I realized I was most looking forward to being like a priest professor and not most looking forward to the sacraments. And so I stepped away. I ended up getting an MFA so that I could teach in the visual arts. And on Pentecost Sunday, we were back at my home parish, and I was chatting with this guy I had just met, and he was like, "Oh, I'm the art professor at Holy Cross College." And I'm like, "Oh, interesting. Well, I just graduated with an MFA, and I'd love to adjunct for you if that's possible." And he said, "I'll think about it. I'll see what I can do." So I adjuncted for them that first year, and then the next year they opened up a position for me, and so now I'm full-time.
Full-time. What's an MFA? Masters of Fine Art?
Right, Master of Fine Arts. So that's the terminal degree for the artist. So they don't expect us to go off and get a PhD. They let us get away with a master's degree. So it's a professional, practical degree. And so now I'm here.
Let's rewind, Stephen. Let's go back to childhood and early inspirations. What drew young Stephen to art? Have you always been interested in art?
Yeah, art has always definitely been an interest of mine. If you had seen me as a kid, I was probably either outside playing, jailbreak or tag or flag football with my neighbors, or I was inside doodling. So I often had a pen and paper with me. And yeah, even as a kid was kind of particular about the art supplies that I used. And as a child, I wanted to either be a professional baseball player or an artist. And so I got one of the two.
I love it. Did you play baseball in school too?
Yeah. I played baseball through high school, but that was it for me.
Never went through college?
No,
the
not through
minors
college.
didn't grab you?
No. There's still hope, though. You never know.
Amen. Well, what's interesting to me is there's always hope, brother. Yeah, the Tigers are going to call.
Yeah.
When I think of art, I don't always think of storytelling. Was that always united for you, or is that something that kind of evolved or grew over time to use your artwork and use it as a storytelling medium?
Yeah, it's an astute question because I don't think people often, make the connection between story and art. And I would say that it wasn't something I intentionally thought about really until I was in the MFA program, which was, focused on image and storytelling and visual culture and how all these things come together. And so, yeah, I found myself thinking more about it, but I would say that there's a sense in which I think for all of us that an image is more compelling if it at the very least implies a story. And so, as a child, I remember finding, we had this like coloring book of fairy tales, and the illustrations were by this like golden age of illustration illustrator named Arthur Rackham. And they were just like so rich and kind of like gritty and detailed. And yeah, sure, the story is the story, but like there was so much told through the image that even that excited me. So yes, I think that there's a story component to the images, but I didn't think about it explicitly really until maybe the last like 5 years.
Well, and what I love about that, and I'm trying to do it in the podcast, is people don't like facts all the time. Like they don't want a direct answer to the question.
Mm-hmm.
They want an anecdote, a story. They want to understand the nuance, the push and pull, the yin and the yang of someone's journey. And a story often can tell someone an answer to their question better than the actual black and white answer. And so that's why I love storytelling, because it builds nuance into every question. And there's always nuance into it. And you're taking that to another level with pictures as a storytelling medium, which is so deep. I love art. I love beauty. Okay, let me hit you with a hot take. Is there beauty? Is there one beauty? Is beauty a thing, or can it be different to each person?
Man, well, you've hit, I think, something of a nerve there. So
yes, that I did my job.
Yeah, good work. So have you heard the phrase "beauty will save the world"?
No.
Okay, so this is a phrase that's often thrown around in, I think, especially in Christian art circles, but certainly it's something that many artists call upon, and it's attributed to Fyodor Dostoevsky, who's a famous Russian author. And I take issue with the statement, because when people use the statement "beauty will save the world," what they typically mean is like making beautiful things will save the world. But then if they're called to justify it, what they do is they say, yes, well, beauty is an attribute of God, perhaps even a synonym of God. So really, when I say beauty will save the world, what I mean is God will save the world. But that's an equivocation, and that's not actually what they're saying. And so I think there's an attendant risk with praising beauty too much. Beauty is a creature. Beauty is not God, although God is beautiful. So that's how I would frame it. I don't know if that's fair to say. Who knows? Maybe I just spoke heresy, because I would also agree that God is beautiful, but I don't think that we should worship beauty or hold beauty in too high of esteem, because it's too slippery of a concept, and it's too easy for us to conflate beauty with God. And when I say that, I mean conflate the visual goodness, the visual representation of something, the attractiveness of something with God himself. And I'm uncomfortable with that, because I actually think it can lead people to some bad places.
I thought you were going to go in a completely different direction. I cannot wait to re-listen and unpack that. My mind right now is in a knot. I don't even know how to ingest that, because to me, beauty has always led to reflection, to contemplation, and to, in a way, just contemplation in the most beautiful way. But you're right. And I think of someone like a Bishop Robert Barron, who makes intentionally Word on Fire. Everything through Word on Fire is beautiful.
Yes.
And it draws you to the faith. It draws you to God. But you're right. You make a great distinction, because someone like me is ugly, but despite my ugliness, I could still lead others to God. And ugly things can lead to God. Beauty itself is not God, but beauty can lead you to God. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I'm totally comfortable with that. And I do think that there are some people, who knows, maybe someone could sort of school me theologically on this, but let me think for a second. Okay, so I'm pretty sure, I'm not an expert in scholasticism nor in Thomas Aquinas, but I'm pretty sure his definition of beauty is that which delights the eye. And so if it's a quality of something that delights the eye, then we need to start thinking about, we just need to be careful. Another well-known theologian, Paul Evdokimov, wrote this book on iconography. And he quotes Dostoevsky in there, although I haven't been able to find the origin of the quote. He says something like, beauty is a battleground between God and the devil, and the prize is the human heart. Because, and think about it too, you know, Lucifer is the angel of light, and beauty most often comes to us through reflected light. And so that can also be distorted and misused, and things can attract and dazzle us that aren't actually for our good. So those are some nuggets to think about to caution us from putting beauty in too high of a place.
Well, that's crazy. That's amazing. I can't wait to do a self-reflection guide on this to help me and all the audience unpack some of this. So let's say not everyone that listens to the podcast, maybe 50% are Christian, maybe more. Some aren't. So I'm trying to think of an extended question for them. Like if I'm them, we're talking, I heard you say the words heresy. I heard you say the word God and all this religious talk. Let's say there is no God. Is beauty real? Is it a thing? Is it an objective thing? Or is it all subjective? Or is beauty a proof of God? But based on your prior comments, I'd say no.
Yeah, so I think two things that might be helpful for listeners is, so while I just went through that session of cautioning us about beauty, maybe I should also provide a counter argument. That might be helpful, but I want to answer your first question as best I can. I don't know how to answer I think it's undeniable that beauty is a thing because people have experiences of beauty. So I would say that, yeah, in the same way that we experience pain, and it's kind of a universal experience, and that's a sufficient proof. We don't need to make a philosophical argument. I think we've all experienced beauty in some way or another. And so we don't need to make a philosophical argument about whether or not beauty exists. So that's where I would kind of start with beauty. You know, the whole beauty in the eye of the beholder, the subjective or objective nature of it. I don't know enough, and I'm not practiced enough in that area to make a claim. So maybe I'll just leave it at that. One thing I will say though is, you know, oftentimes, again, another slippery area with beauty is we often do think of like the physical quality. But if you think about how people use the word beauty or beautiful, probably when they mean it like the deepest, you know, when they touch their chest and they say it, usually they're talking about a moral good. They're talking about someone who has done something so selfless or thoughtful or sacrificial that it actually touches them. And then they physically touch themselves, like that was beautiful, a gift or an act or something like that. And so then you think about, oh, well, when we talk about beauty, are we even talking about it like at the deepest level? So anyway, I just want to also flag that for people. Right. It's about the quality of something, an action or a moral act that's so profound that it touches them in a unique way. I said I would make a very brief counter argument. So that's part of it is like, if you wished to say beauty will save the world, well, first I would say Jesus Christ has already saved the world. And also you're not going to save it by something that you make. But what I would say is you could argue that it is those acts, those beautiful acts of self-sacrifice that actually make people in the world inspired or uplifted to in turn act well. And then the other counter argument you could make, I think, is something similar, which is like, if you live in a building that is drab and heavy and totally inhuman and unbeautiful, that environment has an effect on you. But if you live in a space that is shaped and made for the human, that allows humans to interact in positive and healthy ways, then the beauty of that space will also orient you and lift you to higher things, which is also why it makes sense that we spend so much effort making a church beautiful. So I want to hold these two things in tension, that like beauty is not a god to worship, but also that beauty is a very, 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 very good and important and human thing.
I love that. You just provided literally months and years of reflection ideas for me. And I'm not going to go there today, but another time. One of my listeners, please challenge me on why the church spends so much on church buildings, and historically, why are the cathedrals so big and massive and beautiful and gold everywhere? I think there's an amazing answer to that. But let's keep pushing forward,
All right,
Stephen.
let's go.
Because I want to get to your book, but I want to get to a couple other things first. So you're teaching at Holy Cross College. What do you teach, and how do you integrate faith with creativity? Are the two intertwined in your classroom, or are you totally technically art-based?
So I teach mostly graphic design here at the college, but I also have the chance to teach some of the seminar courses. So in the fall, I teach a first-year seminar called the Mind and Heart Seminar. And the goal of that is to orient incoming students to the intrinsic goods of education. And so each professor gets to do that in slightly different ways. I'm in a bit of a pinch here. So my colleague, Angelo Martinez, he's an awesome artist, a man of deep faith. He does an awesome job of incorporating art into his, faith into his prompts for his students. I think he has a slight advantage because a lot of what they're doing is the more traditional studio arts. So they are drawing, they are painting, they're using photography. And so he can sort of shape the subject matter in a way that the work becomes a reflection on faith. And that's been great. And it's actually borne a lot of fruit here at the college. Part of my challenge, and I hope it's not a crutch or an excuse, but part of my challenge is I get them for a very compressed section of courses. And there are so many things that I need to teach them technically so that they can be prepared to work as graphic designers, that it's hard to incorporate the faith without it being simply like a content thing. Like, okay, look, I'm going to teach you how to use InDesign. You're going to have to make a multi-page document. Therefore, it needs to be about a church. Like, that could be a way to incorporate the faith, but it doesn't feel like it has enough teeth for me. So there are some projects where I'm able to do it, but for the most part, it's really about equipping them with the skills they need.
Love that. And it goes back to the old phrase, preach always, and when necessary, use words. Your virtue, your work ethic, that's what I hold on to a lot in my work is you don't have to be preaching the gospel verbatim to be preaching to people about life and eternity and the truths therein. Mm-hmm. So I love that. I love that. You are the first person, Stephen, I ever met who writes icons. Mm-hmm. Can you explain to the audience? I learned this terminology from you.
Okay.
Why do you write icons? Why don't you draw icons? And for the audience, we're talking about the beautiful sacred art you see on walls. I think of it often with like the Eastern Orthodox Church or the Greek Church. Beautiful gold gilded, not always gold, I guess, but that's the way I think of it. Mm-hmm. Walk us through what an icon is and why do you write them and not draw them?
Got it. So I think you described it well. Yeah. So an icon is typically an image of Christ or an image of the saint. Probably the most two commonly depicted subjects would be Jesus or Mary or them together. But also you can depict saints, and they are a form of sacred art, sometimes liturgical art, like they're actually used in church structures. Sometimes they're used for private devotions in people's homes, but they are images meant to orient us towards God. And so oftentimes, I believe in the East, like you said, some of the Eastern churches, it's a tradition that you put them in the corner of a room. So the idea is that they're not just sort of flat against one wall, but in fact, anywhere you are in the room, that the presence of presence of the Holy Spirit through that saint can sort of be made manifest in this small way. So you asked, like, why do you write one and not paint or draw one? The most, let's say like tier one of the answer is, my understanding is that the Greek word graphos, to write and to draw, is the same. And so you could say like, well, if you were making sort of a literal translation, graphos would be to write. But the other element is that it's sort of calling upon Scripture, and that Scripture is the Word of God. And even though you might not be depicting something of Scripture, you are depicting in some way the holiness of the Logos, that is Jesus Christ. So the Logos is the Word. So you are writing the Word in a way by depicting this saint. So I think there are connections there. I'm sure that people who are more versed in it might have other elements to that, but that's usually how I think about it.
Love that. And how did you get into icons? That seems like, of the art world, it's a pretty niche world.
It is pretty niche. As I've sort of moved more towards picture books, I've sort of discerned that that's more my calling than writing icons. But part of the reason I started writing icons is I was a seminarian for a long time. I've always been interested in art. And so when I left, I had this MDiv in hand. I'm like, I want to use my art to serve God and glorify God and serve the church. And so it's like, what do I do? Well, I think I should probably write icons. So I met with this, I met with this Holy Cross priest, and he teaches art over at Notre Dame. And I was like, Father Martin, this is where I'm at. I'm trying to figure out what to do. What should I do? And he's like, if you're thinking about whether or not I should make icons, he's like, you should make icons. And it's like, oh yeah, that's awesome advice. And so I took that advice, and then I just started writing them. And actually, that was actually very helpful in my discernment that, it didn't seem to be the place where God was calling me. But in that period, I still produced quite a few.
It's amazing. And you got your Master's of Divinity from Notre Dame, right?
Correct. Yes.
So undergrad at Washington University, grad at University of Notre Dame and now teaching at Holy Cross. Did I get that right?
Close. Undergrad at Notre Dame, grad at Notre Dame, and then my MFA was at WashU in St. Louis. Yeah.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. Okay. So that makes total sense. And I mean, in a way, to the listeners, we've all got things we want to start. And I've been hitting on the show, the only way to start is to start. And you don't know what the end destination is going to be. There's many dominoes that are going to fall between now and when you die. And that seems stark, but like, I thought I was going to write a book, so I started a Substack. Then I realized, oh, people aren't going to read these articles because I'm nobody. So I need to put them out in podcast form. And then my wife informed me that I'm not interesting enough by myself. So I need to interview people to make these and they're very nuanced topics. We're talking about fulfillment of life here. So you need to bring guests on. And it's I never in 1,000 years when I started this podcast almost a year ago would have thought I'm going to be doing long form interviews. I thought I was going to be putting out articles. And here we are. So, and like you're an artist. You started writing icons. Now you're creating children's books, which is insane. I still can't wait to get there. I've got so much to say on it. But let's take one more half step in your art journey.
Okay.
3D coloring pages. So you have these free printable crafts for kids. They're 3D. They're really awesome. What's the story behind this? Why do you put these out?
Sure. Okay, so that started back during COVID, and I was like, okay, what can an illustrator do to help parents and families who are at home? And so this was pre-grad school. I didn't know what I was going to be doing with my art skills, and so I spent a lot of time just making these like printable crafts that kids could use. And I don't have much of an audience, but they were still downloaded quite a bit, and there were a few families that messaged me and were like, these were super awesome. My son or my daughter loves making them. And actually part of the new book is that there are some of these activities associated with it. And we all know this, like the screen, even though it's tactile, it doesn't improve our dexterity at all. And so kids who are growing up engaging with puzzles and word searches and homework on the screen, well, every time they're doing that, they're not using their hands to try and pick up a puzzle piece and turn it around or deal with these things tactilely. And so I also want to give kids something to do with their hands that can help them to sense and feel and explore and live in the actual world.
Wow. Okay. So now we're moving to your thesis project, the Wizard's Alphabet book. I think that was the precursor to the book you're releasing, Alphabet Parade.
Precisely.
Talk to me about the story of the Wizard's Alphabet book and how that evolved into Alphabet Parade.
Okay. Where to join in on the story. So the thesis process is well organized, but it takes different shapes for each person. And I was notorious among my classmates. Like in the fall semester was kind of like when you plan the project, and then sort of spring semester is when you like made the thing. So I was notorious amongst my classmates for like being like, okay, I've got it. This is what I'm going to do. And then we go off and we work for a week, and then we come back and everyone has made progress and I have changed my project. So I changed my project like tons and tons of times in this fall semester, trying to figure out like what was the thing. And so what I was really trying to do was explode the alphabet book for the same reasons I just described, like wanting to give kids something tangible to do. I wanted them to like somehow be immersed inside of the alphabet. And so we did this like one writing exercise with a visiting writer, and I don't even remember what the prompt was, but I started to kind of like imagine the scene in, have you seen The Sword and the Stone, that old Disney movie from like the 1960s?
Yeah.
Okay, so there's a scene early on where there's like an errant arrow and he like goes to find it and he falls into the wizard's like cabin, and Merlin is like, oh, I'm going to teach you all this stuff. And his cabin is full of all these things. And he has this spell that he starts to sing, and all of the things in his room sort of like join in this parade, and they get jammed into his little carpet bag. And he's like, great, now we're ready to go. So it like all packs up in that bag. So that kind of came to mind. And I was like, what I'm hoping to do in my project is to like take his bag for a child and like explode it open. So I want to like show a child the world through whatever this project is that I do. And so that kind of set me on this mission, which led to me making these drawings, which I didn't even intend to be a picture book initially. But so that's what led to these drawings, was like this wizard persona, this desire to like teach children something about the world and go. And that's what I came up with.
So when you were doing your thesis project, you were just doing the drawings. Were there words associated with the book, or was it just drawings?
There were no words, and it wasn't a book. And in fact, the original drawings are super tiny because I draw small, and then I color them digitally and blew them up. And then for my actual thesis exhibition, what you did was I suspended them in a ring, a 10-foot ring, and you actually like walked inside the alphabet. So each letter is illustrated by combining. So for the listeners, each letter is illustrated by combining a bunch of different things that start with the same letter. So then each of those illustrations had its own cloud, and then it was like a substrate that I cut in the shape of the cloud. And then so you would walk into this space and be surrounded by the alphabet, but there were no letters anywhere, but there were no like actual glyphs of letters anywhere. And so it became this like communal space for exploration and observation and naming things and making jokes and asking questions. And yeah, it was fun.
So what's crazy about Alphabet Parade. So I got number 316 out of 500 of the early release books. I love that you hand wrote. And it's like a whiskey bottle where when you
Nice.
get like a limited release whiskey bottle, they pack it up and they write what number it is. That was such a cool touch, Stephen. You are so artistic. The details you thought of are so amazing. And your handwritten signature, oh my gosh, is so beautiful. You wrote
Thanks.
a handwritten note. It's so beautiful.
Thanks.
But I've read it now 3 times to my son Colby and my son Dominic. And every time I see more. It's so crazy because there's so much packed into these images. And like, it makes sense that it started without words actually, because for the audience, I mean, it's not A is for apple. And Stephen draws a beautiful picture of an apple. There are like 20 images, all connected, all interacting with each other. And everything, this is what I just realized literally this morning at 6 a.m. as I'm reading the book to Colby. Everything on the page starts with A. Even though the words don't reference everything, like of course you have beautiful rhyming scheme and there's a beautiful story, and you do talk about the things that start with an A, but I was like, everything else in this picture also starts with an A.
Yes.
Which it's so deep. And it's almost, I'm like, dude, was Stephen on some sort of peyote trip or something crazy? Because the pictures are so far out. Did you just have an absolute blast with it?
It was super fun to draw. Yeah, thanks for saying that. It was quite intense because, as I said, I had many false starts in the process. So my time period to actually produce these drawings was very compressed. So there were some very early mornings. Like there was a period where I was waking up at like 4:30 in the morning so that I could get enough time to draw. Yeah, doing something 26 times is quite intense. Yeah, and part of the fun was that something I realized in the process was that if I penciled something out too carefully or like too completely, then my drawing would die when I inked it. It would sort of like get frozen. So what I did for these drawings was I printed out word lists. This was pre-AI. So I like got dictionaries, found the words I wanted to use, printed them out really small, and then I kind of associated them just on my desktop, like what might go together. And then I loosely would draw like, okay, this big circle is where the fire truck's going to go. It's probably going to be driven by a frog, and maybe the flamingo goes here. And I just took my ink pen and I just went for it. And I wanted some of that like precariousness, that wobble, that risk, because I wanted the drawings to be alive. So anyway, what you often see, and actually I see now because I did these drawings at this point like 3 years ago. And so sometimes I look back and I'm like, oh, I find little jokes that I made. And I'm like, I don't remember making that joke. That's fun.
It's like in a Disney movie, there's 2 movies going on. One is for the kids, and then there's the deeper layer that's for the adults watching.
Nice. Yeah.
So the adults can like get some of those inside jokes or more mature jokes. And the drawings are like, I find myself laughing out loud. And my son Colby's like,
Awesome.
Why are you laughing? And I'm like, well, because there's a flamingo on a stick on the front of a fire engine, and there's a flame that the flamingo's blowing out a flame, which I actually just associated in my head. There's another bird on a stick. The bird must start with an F.
Yeah, it's a falcon.
Falcon. And I'm like, Colby, a fire truck would never have a falcon on the front of it or a bird on the front of it, because I didn't know it was a falcon then. And it's like, and that flamingo couldn't blow fire. And there's so much other stuff. Well, you're like, X is for xylophone. What did you expect?
Yeah.
It's like, you're so clever. Did you write the words for the book?
I did. So I wrote the words last probably fall, maybe. It took like a whole semester for me to write them. But yeah, I wrote the words. Yeah.
How did you do it? Because you had the picture. I guess I always imagined an author would create a text and then you'd give it to an illustrator and the illustrator would illustrate what the story is about. But you did it in reverse. Was it hard to write the text after you had the picture?
It probably was a little harder. So you're right. I think that's the general process. But since I had already done the drawings, I'm like, I need to do something with this. I should make this into a book. By the way, for the listeners too, every drawing is kind of based around a vehicle. So that's partly why it's a parade. I also, one other tidbit, I illustrated this with like my 6-year-old self in mind. So I was like, what would 6-year-old Stephen think was cool? So that's also why there's like a vehicle in every image. So I kind of came up with a pattern. This helps to answer the question, how did I write it? So there's a pattern for every couplet. So it's letter is a vehicle, usually with some added description about the vehicle, and then a something does something, a something that starts with that does something. So F is a fire truck full of fancy stuff. A frog is the fire chief. His staff is up to snuff. And that same sort of pattern repeats. And I think that's partly actually why X, the joke of X, can hit in a different way, because it starts off the same way, but then it's like, bro, I can't do this for X. So it's like,
yeah, it breaks the couplet. It's, my gosh, every time I've read that, I've laughed, Stephen. It's so
awesome,
darn creative. And I don't want to give away any of the other images for the audience. You just have to go get the book. It's so creative. It reminds me of an old school book, because a lot of the books we get from like Miss Dolly's library or from a lot of it is digitally created. So you can tell the illustrator went on an iPad, and it's very beautiful and very captivating. It draws you in, but it doesn't feel like it was done with the hand. And your art very much feels like it was done with the hand, like you drew it, pencil and paper, pen and paper.
Yep.
So that's cool. That's really cool. Okay. All right. Anything else on the book to share before we move on to the last 2 segments?
No, let's go. That's good.
All right. At the end, we're going to have to tell the people where they can actually find this book.
Cool. Okay.
Wisdom and encouragement for budding artists. So there's actually a lot of college people. When I look at the data for the show, we've got tens of thousands of listens, over 100,000 listens, millions of impressions and engagement. A lot of those, when I look at the data, come from college students, actually, sophomore to seniors in college, or those like 23 to 28-year-olds that are new in the workforce. So they're still kind of budding and aspiring, Stephen. What would you say for those people that are interested in the arts, and if there's any cross-domain wisdom that you can cross to, if you're pursuing any hobby, things to think about?
Yeah, awesome. Well, first of all, congrats. Those are awesome numbers, and maybe that actually plays into my first bit of wisdom, because that stuff didn't happen overnight. And to have a successful podcast or a successful Substack, you have to be consistent, and you have to consistently produce quality stuff. So congrats to you for doing that. And maybe that's my first bit of advice to young people, is like the ethic of the phone and of the internet have taught us that things can happen instantly. And also, we only ever see famous people or successful people when they're famous or successful. And
wow,
you think of Jesus, who lived a hidden life and ministry for 30 years, and then had his public ministry for maybe about 3. And so Tolkien didn't write The Lord of the Rings until he was in his 50s. And I'm not saying either of us is going to become Tolkien, but it's a temptation to think like, oh man, if I don't get 6,000 followers in the next week, then I must not be cut out for this. But actually, it takes a lot of quiet and hidden hard work to get anywhere. Sure, there are a blessed few who, maybe they're just super talented or they catch the right break. But for the rest of us, it takes a lot of slow and hard and deliberate work. So I guess that's a long caution for patience.
Yeah, and that's so true. I hit on that a lot in the podcast, is consistency. It's not about short bursts. Those lead nowhere. You have to have bursts within the consistency. Short bursts lead to nothing. Consistent action over long periods of time lead to something that you can't even imagine. When I was journaling for the last 25 years of my life, I never thought it'd lead to a Substack or this podcast. It was just for self-reflection for me. And a lot of those thoughts will never be revealed, because they're gifts for myself, or
Mhm.
for my wife and family. And it's like, sometimes you don't know where these things are going to go, but it's about the consistent practice. And so I love that. I love that. Before I go to my rapid fire round, I want to know, where can we find your work? Where can they get your book? Are you on social media, upcoming releases, all that stuff? Hit us.
Okay. All right. I'll hit you with it. It's pretty simple because I try to live a small digital footprint. But right now, the book is on Kickstarter until October 6th. So you can pre-order it on Kickstarter. If you go to alphabetparade.com, that will redirect you to the Kickstarter page. There's also a StephenBarany.com, or you could also go to buildablebooks.com, which is like the publishing company that I started to self-publish this book. So there's all sorts of ways, but yeah, the easiest is probably just to look up my name or to go to alphabetparade.com.
I love that. Spell Stephen Barany for
Okay.
us so they know. StephenBarany.com.
Yep. StephenBarany. Kind of like two compound words. Step, hen, bar, any. I can maybe help you to remember it.
Boom. All right. You're going to have to reinforce the mainframe, baby, because the people are coming.
Okay.
All right. Bonus round as we wrap up this
Okay.
Fulfillment Project episode here, Stephen. Favorite saint?
Shoot, this is rapid fire. Favorite saint, favorite saint, favorite saint. I'm not being very good at rapid. I'm going to say Leo the Great because, well, he's the namesake of our son.
Why'd you pick him as the namesake of your son? A couple episodes ago, I went into the power of names and why we picked the name of our son. So I love that you said that.
Well, so what's actually interesting is he's named for both Leo the 13th and Leo the Great. I had Leo the 13th in mind. We had Leo the 13th in mind when we thought of Leo for him. But Leo the 13th isn't canonized, and so we said like, well, his it'll be Leo the 13th, but also his patron officially will be Leo the Great since he's canonized. But then what was super cool is that when Pope Leo became Pope Leo, he essentially said like, yeah, but I'm referencing Pope Leo the 13th because he was such an essential and influential figure. So anyway, that's a fun little nod for our boy.
I love that. I love that. Your most inspiring artist. What artist inspires you the most?
Probably Richard Scarry.
Why?
Are you familiar with Richard Scarry?
Literally not until this morning when I was talking to Shannon about how crazy your pictures were. And she said, well, don't you know Richard Scarry? And I said, no. And she said, you never saw Richard Scarry's books? And I was like, no. So she was showing me pictures literally just this morning.
Yeah. I wish I could say like, a person who I know was a man of faith or, did great things outside of picture books. I don't know much about his personal history, but the way he illustrated and the freedom of his line work and like the joy he brought kids, I think he was up to amazing work, whether he did it consciously or not. And I could go into a small defense of why I think his work is so important, but yeah, it'd definitely be Richard Scarry.
Crazy that Shannon was just telling me about that this morning.
Yeah, that's fun.
So you were talking a minute ago about during your thesis project having to wake up at 4:30 to get some of this artwork done. What's your go-to creative ritual?
If I had a more stable schedule, I think I probably would actually have a creative ritual. But my creative ritual is essentially, it's so practical, it's uninspiring. It's like I have this little to-do list in my pocket. Can you see this little to-do list?
Yep.
My little to-do list. And yeah, I have things in there that I need to do to sort of like move the project forward. And so I just try and tackle basically as many of those as I can a day. So it's like, I've got 15 minutes between now and class and I've already class prepped. Like, which of these things can I knock out? And I'm not always that diligent about it, but that's basically what it is. If there is a routine, it's to sometimes like maybe once a week, I do wake up at like 4:30 or 5 and like squeeze in like an hour of like really focused, really productive work before my wife and Leo wake up.
Someone said on the podcast many episodes ago now, but they said 1 hour before 9 a.m. is worth 2 hours after 9 a.m. Mm-hmm. And I always kind of knew that internally, but having him say it, I was like, that is so true.
It's crazy. Traditionally, typically it's like I'm more of a night person. It's easier to stay up late than it is to wake up early. But it is crazy. Like when I do get up early and I'm able to squeeze in that, hour to 90 minutes of work, it's like everybody wakes up and I'm like, I think I just did a whole day of work. So I feel great. Anything else that happens today is gravy because we just did the hardest stuff.
Amen. Truly, amen. It's Jose Maria calls it the golden moment, like making that hard choice. And for me, that the golden moment is not hitting snooze and getting up, baby,
Nice.
and just embracing that golden moment.
Nice.
What's one word you'd use, Stephen, to describe your art?
Wobbly. I think I mean that in two ways. One is like I intentionally use a wobbly line because, as I said before, if it's too planned or too steady, then it kind of dies. But wobbly also because I want there to be a playful precariousness in the drawings themselves. And so in the same way that if you were watching like a comedian or someone, I don't know, tell a story, and they were always like just a little bit on edge, that it might keep you engaged. I think that maybe I'm trying to call upon that in my artwork. So I'm going to say wobbly.
I love that. And your son, Leo, this is the last question.
Okay.
How do you want your son, Leo, to think of you and to remember you after you're dead?
I think I want him most, I was having a conversation with my pastor once, and this might have even been before we were married or before Leo was born. But he said something like, the only real thing you need to worry about as a father is that your children know that you love them. And maybe that's like it sounds like too simple of an answer. And so you said, maybe we have a lot of young listeners. Maybe, I don't know if you would agree, Andy, but maybe we could just say to listeners, like, trust us on this. And God willing, when you become a parent, if you are remembered as someone who loved and showed that love through sacrifice and intentionality and time spent and thoughtfulness and all those different things that go into that, then what the heck, that's a win.
Wow, I love that. And you even unlocked something in my brain just now. I wonder if that's why we appreciate our parents more the older we get, because you start to appreciate a lot of the hidden things that they did for me out of love that I didn't understand as a child or didn't even see, wasn't capable of seeing until now that I'm older. I thought, oh my gosh, they did that. Never mentioned it.
100%.
Because it's just part of it.
100%.
So, wow. I love that. Stephen Barany, thank you for joining Fulfillment Project. Everyone, you got to head over to StephenBarany.com. Check out his stuff. Tons of cool stuff on there. The free downloads for the coloring pages, which actually we like to do on like a Friday night, glass of wine, get some coloring. Nice. And so I had a guest on and he was talking about creative hobbies versus consumption hobbies. And it stoked a fire in us to try to have more creative hobbies than consumption hobbies. And like coloring is so simple, but it's like we can chat, we can color, we can have a glass of wine or whatever and just enjoy. And you've got them for free, so I'm actually going to download some and take them home for this weekend. Everyone, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time.